ask you a question, and that is, what is in your life's blueprint?
This is Jeremy Till, the host of the Operator Podcast. We'll be taking you on a journey with us, interviewing some of the top performers in their field on how they operate and get the job done. At the end of the day, we want to be our best. We're going to help provide the information, the data, and the science of how to achieve that, mentally, physically, and spiritually. Let's go! Let's go! Coach Jesse O'Brien is our next guest on Operator Podcast. Jesse is a partner of mine in Central Athlete. He is a trainer extraordinaire, really the brains behind Central Athlete here in Austin. We are closely associated through affiliation with OPEX, which is out of Scottsdale, Arizona. Jesse is the highest level trainer with the OPEX modules, been in the fitness industry for years and just been pecking away at really understanding and learning the systems of business and of the human body. He's implemented tons of technology and training protocols to give our athletes the best ability to meet their personal goals. Jesse's real sharp in the sense of his ability to bring people together and wrap around a new idea in the marketplace. So it's just been a pleasure to do business with him, and to say the least, he's one of the most integrity, ethic-driven person that I know, doing it by the books each and every day. So it's an honor to work with him and know that he's trustworthy, and what he says is. That's always a remarkable trait in a human being. So let's get into it with Jesse. I want to divulge some information. Me and Jesse are business partners, so if anybody thinks that there's anything funny going on here, we are in relationships. So since that's disclosed, I met Jesse probably about 9 years ago. Yep. He was a skinny young punk from TCU. But no, he was a good old guy from CrossFit Westlake at the time. Do you remember the first time we met? Was it at a fitness experience or CrossFit the fittest? Oh, dang it. Sorry, CrossFit. Blank that. CrossFit Central. Blank that. Copyright infringement. Blank that. Can you delete all that out of the podcast? So the first time we met, was it at a fitness games?
I think it could have been. I do remember one of the first times we met was probably Fight Gone Bad. Could have been at a Fight Gone Bad. But we always knew of you before we knew you, because you were the one who brought CrossFit to Central Texas, essentially. And Westlake CrossFit was essentially a something that developed from CrossFit Central. Joss and Javon essentially came from CrossFit Central, or, worked out there. And so, they were kind of a seed from the flower that was CrossFit Central.
Whoa. Seed from the flower. Yeah. That should be the quote from our podcast.
Yeah.
So man, that was back in 2008. I know Javon worked with us for a short stint before the Westlake facility opened up. And it's kind of like, from 2008 to 2017 that we're in now, it's kind of like what we were talking about earlier is, other people going and getting corporate jobs, people really starting to get married and have children and lifestyle changes, and now starting to see who the career professionals that actually stay in the space of training and coaching. And, I think we're in that crux of seeing even more people, because in my view, I think the early adapters to CrossFit were younger 25-somethings, because I don't really see 25-somethings opening CrossFit boxes anymore in Austin. And I know the national market's totally different, but, in the sense of saying that we are partners, I know that you operate and run Central Athlete, and you migrated over from a CrossFit affiliate into a OPEX model facility and whatnot. So let's talk about Central Athlete and about your introduction to OPEX, to James Fitzgerald, OPT at the time, kind of how you segued from CrossFit into where you are today.
Yeah, I mean, I think what makes sense is to give a little context in my backstory at Westlake CrossFit. And, my viewpoint was that CrossFit was probably one of the most powerful things that has come into the strength and conditioning world in the last 100 years. It's popularized Olympic lifting, it's popularized gymnastics, and it's bringing a whole new model to training. And so that's what initially brought me into this. It was the gateway to physical subculture for me. And it was such a powerful thing. Yet once you get into it as a professional, as you know, you wake up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning and you have your AM classes, and then you'll have this dead point during the day, and then you have your PM classes. And in your 20s, you can do that for a long period of time. But there comes a point, just like what you're talking about, where the career professionals either stay or they move on to another career. And that's where the problem is because once you want to have kids and a family, working, that lifestyle isn't conducive to a lot of these things that come down the road, as well as financial stuff. Here in the Austin market, these guys last maybe 3 to 5 years before they roll on into another career. And I've seen so many people, so many of our peers get washed up and pushed to the other end. So that was part of the reason that I wanted to pivot my path. Is I think CrossFit was one of the greatest things that's really happened a long period of time, but it wasn't a win for the business owner. It wasn't a win for the coach. And then, there were issues with the clients as well. And so I wanted to keep doing what I was doing, but do so in a way that was aligned for me doing this for the rest of my life. And everybody who works at Central Athlete and myself, we consider ourselves lifers. We want to do this for the rest of our lives, and we're deeply passionate about this. So we shifted the model. You want me to talk about what that model looks like?
So what is that model, Jesse?
Yeah, so instead of a group class model, things are a little bit different, where there's one coach and there's one client, and we're going to develop a program for each of our clients. They're going to have access to come to the gym anywhere from 5:30 in the morning to 8:30 at night, and they're going to have a coach on site to give them direct feedback, but they're going to have the ability to train in a way that is aligned towards their deepest values. So if they want to get bigger and add muscle, if they want to just live well and prosper, if they want to get, I can't say get out of pain, but if they have some nagging injuries, we can help support that. So we're able to design something based upon assessments, based upon their objectives, that is aligned with their deepest values.
Mm-hmm. So with James and the model that he's put together with OPEX, talk about OPEX and the process of going through their modules and your experience there with their education.
Yeah. So what a lot of people don't know is that in 2011, I was on Facebook and I saw this post. And at the time, I followed what was called the Big Dogs blog at the time. And James released this blog with different workouts you would do. And he had won the 2007 CrossFit Games, and he got a lot of attention. So I was really interested in what he was putting out, the content, things he would say, the workouts. So I'd follow what he was doing. And they put out this post on Facebook in, I think, late 2010. And it was these group of people from Calgary where he lived. And what they were doing is they were wanting to raise money for an ashram in India that was the only and the first CrossFit affiliate. And so I ended up linking up with this group, and we raised money. I did probably the worst workout I've ever done. It was 500 burpees for time. It took me 50 minutes, and I've never been so sore. I couldn't rotate my arms for about 6 days. And I was still sore when I got to India. And we literally cut a GHD machine in 3 pieces. We put it into duffel bags, and each one weighed about 80 pounds. We brought it with us. We brought medicine balls, all these things. And so we raised all this money, brought all this equipment to the ashram. And it was me and a couple other people. But one of those people was Brett Marshall, who took second in the games in 2007 and was James Fitzgerald's training partner. And I got to spend a week with him. And this guy was so next level, the way he talked about these kids. He could look at the kids and say, that kid's going to be the best one at climbing a rope. Watch this, because of his lever length and his arms. And sure enough, that kid would beat every kid in the rope climb contest. And he had never seen that kid climb before. He's like, look at this kid. This kid may not be the strongest kid now. Give him 2 years. He's going to be able to clean 225 pounds. And it was a really cool experience. And that was kind of my first introduction to really seeing the value behind some of James's philosophies. And James and Brett ended up having kind of a falling out, and I ended up becoming further linked up with James over the years, and I ended up starting the CCP, I believe back in maybe 2012 or 13, which is his coach's certification program. And so there's 5 modules. There's business systems, there's assessment, there's program design, there's nutrition, and then there's consulting. And so it took me probably about 1.5 years to go through all 5 of those modules. You've got a practical from each module, and then you have a final case study. And at the time I'd probably been to 5 or 6 certifications before, but this was entirely different because I would forget a lot of the information once I went to the certifications. But the good part about what I did with James's work is I had to apply it. Right, is I had to do 30 skin caliper tests. I had to write, 60 program designs for various avatars. I had to assess 25 different people. And then I had to put that together in a final project, which was the case study. And I had so much value from that I ended up tripling my revenue. And I actually shifted more into an individual design model, which was personal training at the time. And I had such benefit from that, not only in finance, but also my confidence. People started becoming attracted to me, not only consumers, but also other coaches. They wanted to know what I was doing. And this was at the time when an assessment was kind of a buzzword. People didn't really quite understand what it was. And so I was able to give very simple, digestible things that coaches should look for before they work with a client that would lead towards, longer term success.
Mm-hmm. And that was from 2011 to 2013?
I think I started the CCP in about 2012, finished it maybe in 2013 or 14. Mm-hmm. And then currently I'm working through the level 2 CCP. And currently there's no level 2 coaches that exist yet. So there's a running between me, a guy named Henry, and a guy named Mike Lee, who are trying to be the first level 2 coach under the OPEX arm. So. Nice. But it's like 10 times of what the level 1 was.
Mm. It's funny. I was I think I met James. I want to say it was 2000. I think January of 2007, or it might have been January of 2006. I think that sounds more right. I don't know. It had to be January of 2007. I was at his level 1 certification for CrossFit.
So he was a participant?
He was a participant, and Big Mike was also getting his level 1 out there. It was in Orange County firefighters venue out that way, and he was getting his level 1. And then I met back up with him at the 2007 CrossFit Games.
Yeah, wow.
Which is funny because it's interesting how people and how life kind of work out, because James was super instrumental in me, even from my standpoint, watching him compete, because that's when I was at the 2007 CrossFit Games, and him and Brett and Spiel and all those guys were getting so amped up, Josh Everett, for the competition on the final day, that I was like, holy smokes, these guys are actually taking this thing serious. And it kind of dawned on me that this thing was going to be pretty big. Then there was the Black Box Summit, 2009. It's critical, pivotal point for a lot of people in the community.
Yeah.
And it's quite interesting, to be a part of those, explosive moments that kind of open up opportunities and things like that. But, James was well on his way into what he is doing today. I think he kind of knew where he was going, maybe not desiring where it went, but knowing where he was going from the early days. So, now with, being in Austin and having Central Athlete, you've been running the business now for 2.5 years, getting something that's kind of brand new underway, and now seeing how many OPEX facilities are there nationwide. Do you know that
I want to say there's probably about 25 to 30.
Is there a website that you can find OPEX affiliates on?
So if you went to opexfit.com, they have a license map where you could see all the affiliates globally. And they're not just here in the U.S. There's global.
And there's 25.
Well. It's about 25 or 30. Yeah. We had a call with most of the licenses yesterday. And there's a current group that's going through some of the curriculum. And there's kind of like a graduate group that was talking yesterday for a monthly call.
Nice. And so in the last 2.5 years, what you felt like you've learned from running the facility? I know the affiliation was just within the last year, but with the Central Athlete, running it for 2.5 years, you feel like you had mentioned the other day, you're just hitting strides with what, the operation is doing.
Yeah. I mean, I think it definitely took us some time to really, get our feet, really solid where we had a firm base. But now that we've really hit our stride, it's been, I'll kind of just talk about my own experience. It's been such, I was thinking about relative to the days when I was at Westlake CrossFit. It's just such better alignment in terms of my day-to-day enjoyment. I'm not so underslept. I really enjoy what I do. One of the things I talk to a lot of other coaches about is how often do you train? Because the first thing that I see that happens is when people get burn up and they stop, they're low on sleep. They're going from appointment to appointment. They're having a hard time making ends meet. The first thing that I see drop is their willingness to train. And that's always a huge red flag for me because it's showing that they're kind of losing their capacity to really be invested into the system. So it's just such better alignment for me in terms of, I just felt trash at the end of the week when I would have to, I'd have to work with 20 some odd individuals, for an hour long session. I would have consultations, all these things. And so it's just such a better work-life balance. And, also from the coaching perspective, there's a clear trajectory. I mean, our coaches have the ability to make 6 figures in under 2 years. The roadmap is there. They are able to easily scale. Whereas as a CrossFit coach, I had this ceiling that I just couldn't, I got to that ceiling maybe 2 years and I couldn't bust past that. So, there's a lot, we're very growth minded. We're chasing PRs, we're chasing, we want to help other people really get fitter. But when our career stagnates, it leaves us feeling unfulfilled. So it's such a better fit for me as a business owner. It's a better fit for all of my coaches. And then, also there's just long-term results. You see people truly getting better. We've got a client here who really has zero true athletic experience, and having a program that's able to really deliver long-term results is just so empowering. She's was never able to do a pull-up, and this girl, it took her 18 months to get her first strict pull-up, but that would have really been difficult or super expensive if I had to put her into a personal training program for her to be able to do that. And so it's just a really rewarding process. And some people on this who are listening to this may not, really see, this girl just got a pull-up. It's not that big of a deal. But if you've never done a pull-up before and getting to the point of developing a pull-up and all the things that it takes, it's a really rewarding process for both me and the client to kind of get there. So I see it as a win between the coaches, the business owner, and the clients.
Well, what I'm hearing you say is that what one of my clients said this morning, that's a therapist that she's a teacher at UT. She said, you're projecting on us. And I was like, of course, that's what we all do is project. And you're projecting on the CrossFit gyms, like your experience of a CrossFit gym, because, with OPEX, they integrate, coaching with business practices. And so when you think about CrossFit gyms and the way that their business models run, not all CrossFit gyms are created equal in the sense that they run businesses. Mm-hmm. So you have a standard that the majority run is group classes, $20 an hour. There's an owner, 3 coaches that are all part-time or free, or a couple part-time. That's like 80%.
Yep.
And that's the kind of model that you're talking about that's really not sustainable. And then there's other boxes, maybe the other 20% that understand a different model. There's a lot of different business training groups that teach different models that are independent of, CrossFit. So I don't know what how that works with the Trade Commission, the FTC on OPEX teaches business coaching, but you'll have licensed affiliates, and what from what I always understood is CrossFit couldn't teach business models, and I don't know how that works within OPEX and all that good stuff, but we've always ran at CrossFit Central where it's a 50-50 split, private training and group instruction, which allows coaches to make from $40,000 to $80,000. Some of our top trainers make $80,000. I know one of our top trainers on point to hit $100,000 of income, 6-figure income, being a trainer and have a full-time job. At the same time, yes, she does have early hours and things like that. So it's her choice on if she were to switch up her hours. But sometimes that is the life that certain coaches choose to do and whatnot. So it's kind of like, to think about it as if there's any, questions about that, is to think about what is your business model, because I see that you you have to upgrade the operating system. Aha, that was a plug, for how you see what it is that you're doing, because all I really hear is just like when he spoke about the rope climb and the levers of the arm and the body is to get up the rope. It's because someone's built to do something at a faster rate, but they have to have the muscular strength to move up the rope, and they have to have the ability and the sight and all that thing that lines up into it. But it also ties back into what I'm saying about business and upgrading the operating system and understanding leverage. If you're in the fitness space and you're not leveraging your hours and then the income that you're making, you're pretty much, if you're charging $40 a private training session, or you have a lack mentality versus an abundant mentality, and you're trying to make it full time, and then you have kids and all this stuff that comes into play. I mean, your ability to navigate terrain of the professional space is lacking, then you won't be able to do it. And what I see from OPEX is that they're educating on multiple fronts to develop the skill sets to be a professional trainer. I think that always seems to be, the part of the conversation is professionalizing the market.
Yep.
Right. And so there's a balance of how you're offering services, what you're providing, and how you professionalize the individual. Because I think that there's this crux in the profession of private trainers or individualized program design or coaches is business confidence, or translated also as value confidence. How much do I charge per session? And do I have the confidence? And what builds confidence? Repetition that you got in your certification courses, and value that you're able to provide to your customer base, and then getting results. And if you see those tangible items, that's where confidence in value increases, and you can charge the rates, to be a professional trainer. I think that's a big gap, especially in today's marketplace. And with the people in it, we want quick results, and maybe we want to be able to charge or make a certain amount of income, is real important. So, I'm just going off here just kind of like to conceptualize what you're talking about, so everyone kind of gets like what angles, you come at, because it really seems to me as more about upgrading the services you're providing, also upgrading the business model that you're providing, and creating a long-term, opportunity for yourself and the staff that follow the systems. Yeah.
Well, I mean, one thing that has to be talked about is sustainability. And again, I'm not saying there's a right or wrong answer, because I've sat, as a business owner, I've sat as a coach at a CrossFit facility. I've been entirely personal training, and now I'm entirely individual design. So I've had, different experiences, different biases, but you have to be honest when you look at each different viewpoint. And, for example, the trainer that you're talking about, on route to make possibly $100,000, it's like, at what expense? And so you talked about leverage. There's no leverage with transactional time. I guess you can leverage your time by, just working more, but that's what I talk about with the unsustainability, is like, you can grind through your 20s, but when that girl wants to get married and she wants to have kids, working, 12 to 16 hour days just isn't going to work anymore. And so then you have to look at it from a different filter. And, coming back to the results perspective, that's one of the biggest things that moved me in this direction. Is I got into this business because I get pumped up when they get results. And so, one of the things, so we worked in Westlake. Westlake is, Westlake and Terrytown are going to be one of the areas where you see the highest concentration of high net worth individuals. So these guys are on average making 150 household. And what that affords is the ability to go on spring break. the ability to go on a winter vacation, the ability to go on a summer vacation. And so what I would see is we would get these people in incredible shape. And then all of a sudden spring break comes, and then they're, left to their own devices. They're not training. They're not eating a certain way, and they come back and they're detrained. And so that would happen 3 times through the year, and that became unfulfilling for me. And so, that's another thing is, okay, you talk about results. How are we consistently getting people results? And I'm not talking 6 weeks isn't consistency. I'm talking about the 5 to 7 year client. How am I taking them from day 1 and making them a completely different person at day 7? And you can't do something like that if you can't support them when they're out of town, because every single person is going to go on vacation or go out of town at some point in their life. So how are you delivering services to the people? Also, from a financial standpoint, if you have some sort of continuity where you're getting continuous streams of revenue, that needs to be built into your service model, because that's the other thing is, like, when I was a personal trainer, when winter comes, I almost, most people don't know this, but I would be really fearful that I would have to, lay my career to rest and move on to something else, because all my business dries up when all these high net worth people are gone. So sustainability is a huge piece of it. And one thing I would encourage is any professional in the coaching industry just ask themselves, how am I looking at sustainability, both from the coach's perspective and both from the client standpoint?
Mm-hmm. So, I think there's a process of development, because again, it's like mapping out what is the multiple approaches that you can to make income if you're coaching group classes, you're doing private training, and if you're doing program design. That word is a label. It's like, oh, I'm going to write you a 4-week program and you're going to do it on your own. Like program design, and you can do it on your own. So it looks like there's this sustainability and diversification. If you listen to any, maybe it depends how, Tony Robbins is all about financial diversification. And then you listen to, what's his name? Who's the owner? Mark Cuban's like, screw, financial diversification, all in one, is his whole mantra. So everybody has their own opinion. But if you're looking at a career, business person in the space of professional training, you're going to have diversification in your revenue streams. And so if your bulk, revenue stream is private training and you're coaching group classes, and then you have some remote clients, do you have the skill sets and the discipline and the, the ability to harness that, as you build out what it is that you do, So I think that, again, listeners could be like, well, I could BS on you, Jesse, because I can do it. So as we're talking about different grades of people that are able to handle and manage, what it is they're doing. But, I'm curious to hear what your opinion is about these celebrity Instagram people that are selling programs online. They're leveraging the virtual space, and they do these 6-week, 8-week challenges, and they have their followings and all that stuff. Do you think that's sustainable? Or I think I might know your answer, but people are kicking butt and making it big on that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and obviously I'm going to be biased to my own experiences, but some of the facts out there is there's roughly 250,000 coaches and strength training professionals in the United States, with 25% of them offering some sort of online program or remote coaching support. Now that word, really what does that word mean? If you're just talking about delivering a program, I'm going to say that there's no sustainable mode around that business model, because anybody can do it. You're just competing with essentially whose program is better. And if you've done this for long enough, really the best
program. I thought it was whose picture on Instagram had the most likes.
Yeah. That's kind of the way it probably is right now.
That's
a real test.
Real quadrant, I think, of why people like, how's your filter pop those abs.
Yeah.
But I'm not joking. I'm serious. Brandon's over there laughing because that's how he gets all his clients.
But we know, that we were talking about earlier about technology disrupting the landscape. What happens when, Instagram in 3 years or 5 years isn't what it is today, or Facebook is something Facebook will be entirely a video platform in the next 3 to 5 years. So things are going to change. And so what's working now, technology just can come up in a matter of months, completely disrupt the scene. And so, for us, there still has to be a lot of deep deliverables behind the coaching. If we're just giving a program to somebody saying, do it, they could just move on to the next person in a matter of months or weeks, but there's a lot more to that process, such as, the coaching aspect and actually physically interacting with people and iterating the process, real-time communication from the results, and that's a big piece. I mean, a lot of times people get programs, but there's no accountability. Nobody's ever sending the results back. There's not any sort of dialogue coming back, So I guess my stance would be time will tell, but it just seems like there's so much competition in people who are just putting programs out. Like what differentiates that product from something else? And I think the final point is nothing will ever replace, in my opinion, some people think artificial intelligence eventually will, but nothing will ever replace the psycho-emotional connection between two human beings. And that's something that remote coaching with Central Athlete does is, there's face-to-face communication, even if it is through a computer. We still do get that interaction. And for our on-site clients, we can actually, see, hear, touch, we can cue them, and nothing ever replaces that. And I think that's, going back to CrossFit, let's talk about what CrossFit was really great at it was that connection, that community is one of the biggest things that it gave. And that's what creates a lot of, what keeps a lot of members there. People come to CrossFit for the results, but the stay for the community, so how can you integrate that community into more of this kind of virtual model or this, this individual design model? And I think that's something that adds a layer of sustainability to the whole process.
What books are you reading right now?
I just got done reading The Vegetarian Myth, and
Next.
I wanted to challenge my viewpoint on that, so I'm reading The China Study right now as well. But I think the most fascinating thing I listened to, which you didn't want to hear much about it, was S-Town. Was the most mind-blowing.
Have you heard that, Nicole?
But if you listen to it, oh my God, like
it's on podcast.
So good, yeah. It's a podcast. Oh my gosh, it's about this guy named Tom McElmore, right? And he's this horologist, this fascination with time, and he's this genius, and he lives in Bibb County, Alabama, and he contacts the producer of S-Town or Serial, and this guy comes out after a year of talking, and then this whole series of events happens, and it is the most fascinating, weird.
So this is a true story?
It's a true story. Yeah, it's nonfiction. It is probably the best thing I think I've ever listened to.
So what's so enticing about it? Because that's always what I like to think
it's
about.
A human interest piece. You're just fascinating with this character, and just, I mean, what happened? Like, how did he get into this state? Why did he never leave this town? Like, why is he, how did he get so intelligent? Like, what brought him to that place? And then,
that just comes back to this, the last month. I mean, I traveled a lot. I went from Mexico and, a resort, a diamond resort that's super nice, and a certain set of people were there. I got to go to Wisconsin and stay out in the countryside and meet Wisconsin folks, Midwesterners. And then I got to go to North Carolina and meet people from out there and visit different environments, and then come back to Austin. Well, I consider one of the most, got to be the top 10, top 20 most liberal cities in the country. And I get to talk to my dad, who's in Lubbock, who's probably one of the top 20 most conservative cities in the country. And then just to see, like, this individual that lived out in Alabama and the, mind that person was given, and I'm just so certain that we all don't live on the same planet. And what does that mean is that there's these consistent variables, but are there? Because in our mind's eye and of our physical eye realm, what shows up is 100% different in the way people see things. And I think even with the transient population moving in across the street in the park, from 7th Street at the, the Arc over there. Listeners, you'll just have to come to Austin and experience it to know what we're talking about. The world that these guys are walking, I just kind of flip the script and think about what they see. when they see our gym over here and what we see, and then talking to all these people. So it's just interesting. It's like this download into a human's brain, in their physiology, in their genetic passing, and then their interaction, engagement in the world. And then how the clumping of, what I hear in like identity politics, and how people clump into groups and tribes and do all this stuff. It's just like people's perspectives and realities are just so drastically different. Yeah. And their intelligence levels are so drastically different. Not saying one's better or worse, but the way that someone will see this room, essentially have probably a year's worth of nutritional supplementation in here if someone need to live off of it for a year, just sitting in a corner. And it's just Nicole sees this as a pile of junk clutter in her office that she wants out. But I'm just saying, like, the way we perceive, reality is just so different. So going back to your podcast is just like, it's just crazy. How did this person get dropped down into that city and all his intelligence, and he didn't leave, and all that stuff is just super interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it's very much chicken or the egg. Was he intelligent, and then he had this unique view on the, on his town, or were there a set of circumstances that led him to believe a certain thing? But an interesting thing is, by the age of 35 years old, 95% of our brain's processes are just learned behaviors, their patterns, their perspectives that have been formed based upon our experiences. So essentially we have this computer that's just automatically running in our head that, essentially we're just kind of running on just automatic mode all the time. And when you kind of think about it, you just think about it like, I am essentially a product of my environment. By the age of 35, it's almost like slightly predestined. There's something interesting about that. You're a product of growing up in conservative Lubbock, Texas, from the father of somebody who owns a farm. A lot of your experiences come out of that, and playing football, and, the times up until you've been, what are you, 36 now, 35? Maybe bleep that out.
Quit trying to box me in, bro. Have you listened to or read the new Bulletproof Book by Dave Asprey?
No.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good, but we won't talk about it then. But yeah, I mean, so it's just like, maybe some of that stuff is good, that you just get locked in and you believe a certain way, or you don't. Maybe it's good. Maybe it's not good. I don't know.
Ignorance is bliss, maybe.
I mean, that's one thing I bring up to my wife, about, all the self-development work we've done. And it's like, maybe if you live out in the country and you are, very simple and love nature, and live in your environment, and you don't need a bunch of material stuff or to travel, and you enjoy your day to day. It's like, man, what maybe just a blessing, And we were talking about this too. And society is like, well, what if everything fell apart and we got to go back to nature and have our own farms and work hard? And it's like, maybe depression would fall apart, and maybe people wouldn't be taking so many antidepressants, and people wouldn't be overdosing on opioids, and because all of this stuff is so readily available, and we had to go back, and then what would happen would, maybe more people would die because there's starvation. It's like, I mean, what's the number of suicide versus, I'm way out of my realm. Listeners are just checking out every second. But Nicole's like, yeah, get back on topic. So it's just a big question of, in today's society, is like, I think with our businesses, bringing it back to our businesses, following our true north, and like trying to keep it professional and keep advancing people. But the last thing I really would circle back to is lifestyle. And it seems that, I want to ask this question of like, what are the core tenets of lifestyle? Because I think that's where I really am moving into fully embracing, like, a lifestyle is really what it takes for long-term health sustainability, long-term compliance, long-term, constantly advancing the technology through what we know as the neuroplasticity of the brain, lifestyle. So when you think about CA and the lifestyle that you present, I know you have a kind of a mapping of some lifestyle suggestions for people within the community. Let's talk about lifestyle.
Yeah. I think there's a great book if anybody wants to learn more about this, and it's called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. And it has to do with stress. And I think stress is one of the most important things to truly understand. Growing up, stress to me was, I've got stressful parents and I'm stressed out because I have a test. But we have to look at everything in light of being a stressor or not being a stressor. So lack of sleep can be a stress, or ample sleep can be something that actually like restores us. Training is a purposeful hormetic stressor on the body. Hormetic stressor meaning that what doesn't kill us essentially makes us stronger. Nutrition, like the same thing as sleep, is it can kind of regenerate us and be great for developing good energy management throughout the day and recovering from training, or it can be something that actually is a stressful thing if we're eating things that we're intolerant to. Maybe we're not eating enough calories relative to how much we're expending. So we have a framework at Central Athlete where stress is really the bottom of the pyramid. And if you kind of think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the next thing up would be sleep. And, getting ample, good quality sleep in a great environment. The next thing up would be nutrition. And then the final thing is training. So this actually blows people's mind, because people would come and see me because they say, I hear you get people in really great shape. And, what I tell people is that training is really the last thing to focus on. Is we have to look at this holistic view of stress. And I want to have a really good understanding about the foods you eat, how much sleep you're getting, and tell me about your relationships. Tell me about your relationship with work. Right? Because if somebody is in a toxic relationship and they just hate what they're doing, why do I want to put them into a really intense training environment? Why do we want to add stress to a stressful situation? In biology, too much stress is failure to thrive, or we'll see death of the organism. And I know that's maybe exaggerated in this sense, but you see a lot of people who don't get results, but they train 6 days per week. Well, why is that? Well, there's too much stress and they can't recover. So you have to be very, very intentional about how you place stress on human beings and how you balance that recovery. And through asking really good questions and understanding who you're working with, I think you can find that right balance.
Thank you for joining us on the Operator Podcast. Please join us on our virtual platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and we will see you soon.